Hey all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandy Broadwell, and today we're gonna do a little short deep dive into Master and Commander. Master and Commander is a novel originally written by Patrick O'Brian in the year 1969. And most people are probably familiar with this book or concept because of the 2003 movie adaptation, which featured Russell Crowe as the protagonist, Captain Jack Aubrey, alongside Paul Bettany as Dr. Stephen Maughton. The book became a series which has over 20 novels in it, and the author continued working on the series up into his death in the year 2000. My husband has read all of the books and really enjoys this series, and I love the 2003 movie. I have seen it many times over the years, and I think it's fantastic, and honestly a crime that they never made more of them. It won several Academy Awards and many other film awards. I was shocked that they didn't choose to dive deeper into the novel series. Oh my gosh. That's my cat knocking over my light. So bright now. There we go. Master and Commander is a historical novel about English naval officers during the Napoleonic Wars. Like I said, have seen the film many times, and for the first time ever, I read the novel. Just the first one, not the entire series. But I just wanted to do a little one-to-one comparison because the novel did not quite meet my expectations. I really thought I was going to love this book after, again, being a fan of the movie and my husband being a huge fan of the book series. That turned out not to be the case. So let's dive into why. As a heads up, there will be spoilers in this video. I'm not trying to ruin the plot for anyone, but I'm not going to get too fine on plot points, mostly just overall broad strokes. But if you really don't want to know anything about this book or movie, then maybe skip this video. So when our novel first starts out, Captain Jack Aubrey, the main character, is not yet a captain. He receives his papers to become the Master and Commander of his first ever ship shortly after the book opens. But the book's opening scene is the meeting of Jack and Stephen. Stephen eventually becomes the ship's doctor, and they are at a music show. They're listening to people play cello and violin, and Jack he's really getting into the music, and he's stomping his feet, and Stephen hushes him and tells him that he's off tempo, and it's really offensive to Jack, and he gets really huffy about it. It's a wonderful opening sequence of what turns out to be a great friendship between these two characters. And the friendship is the anchor of this entire story, both the novel and the books. Both the novel and the film. And that is actually the title of the novel series. It's not Master and Commander, it's Aubrey Maughton, which is the last names of these two characters. And according to my husband, the arc of their friendship over this 20-book series is really the core of what this whole thing is about. So why didn't I necessarily like the book as much as I enjoyed the film? For one, they kind of toned down Jack's character somewhat in the film, and I think that was for the best. In the book, I'm referring to my notes. In the book, Captain Aubrey is a bit of a womanizer, and the book really emphasizes how he had a poor upbringing, and so he really desires money and prizes, and so that's his driving motivation for going after a lot of these ships, because they'll get rewarded for all of the enemy ships that they capture. But we see Captain Jack have flirtations and groping of many women throughout the book, and he has an affair with a married woman. Anytime that they're on shore, he really just kind of makes a fool of himself. Whereas the Jack that we meet in the movie is a bit more suave, and they really don't have any interactions with women in the movie at all. They really don't have any shore time to speak of. And so we don't see that side of him, but also we see In the film, Captain Aubrey is writing a letter to his dear beloved Sophie, which is a good like little Easter egg for book fans, because in the very first book in Master and Commander, their ship is called the Sophie. And so the fact that he was writing a letter to his dearest beloved Sophie as if she was a person, I thought was kind of a cute little treat for the fans. But the fact that he in the movie is portrayed as like having a dearest beloved on shore, and maybe he does in future books. The film definitely drew inspiration from many different novels in the series. It's not the first book, that's for sure. It didn't try to be or pretend to be. It's called Master and Commander: Far Side of the World, so it even has a different title. But in the film, he is a well-established captain. He is no longer in the Sophie. He's in a bigger, better ship. You know, it's obvious that his career has progressed quite far from the first book. The film and both really emphasize Captain Aubrey's like single-minded dedication to the Navy and to the mission. But I think in the movie it comes across more altruistic, of like he's dedicated to the Navy, whereas the book makes it seem a bit more like he's dedicated to winning prizes. Also, I felt very much that the character arc in the book was somewhat non-existent. Captain Aubrey seems pretty much the same at the end of the book as he does at the beginning of the book, whereas in the movie we get an amazing character arc for Captain Aubrey. He does have this single-minded dedication to his mission and to the Navy, but he has to make a choice in the end, basically between his friendship with Stephen, with Dr. Matrin, or to continue the mission to Stephen's detriment and potential death. And I thought that was a really great character moment for him and really showed his growth over the movie. That doesn't happen in the book. The book, in fact, to me felt very much like a series of events that happen. It was lacking in any sort of plot arc that I could see. There was no like rising action, climax, falling action. There was just like things that happened, and they were chronological, but they didn't really build off of one another. It also, for me, lacked a lot of historical context. I was not even aware that we were entering like Napoleonic War era. I knew it was historical and that it was like British Navy, but I didn't know like what time period we were in. And I know shamefully little about the Napoleonic Wars. And so it took me a long time in the book to even figure out like, wait, who are the villains? Like, what countries are we fighting? Like, are those allies or enemies? So I just wish that the author had spoon-fed me a little bit more of historical context instead of dropping me in as if I was a historical expert on this time period and age, because I certainly was not. But if you are a big history buff, I don't think that will bother you at all. Also, to me, the jargon in the book was heavy and basically indecipherable. It was almost like reading a second language at some times. I had absolutely no idea what some of the characters were talking about. And Dr. Matrin is supposed to be kind of more of the like everyman character, who he also is unfamiliar with all the Navy jargon. There's some really funny moments where there's like a naval officer that is talking to Stephen and like trying to introduce him to all these things. And he's like, can you explain these things to me without using all of the naval jargon? And the guy is basically like, well, I don't know why I would. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I did appreciate like kind of the comedic interplay of that, but I don't feel like there was enough of that to overcome the like pretty steep hurdle that jargon actually was, and how much of it there was throughout the book. However, the level of detail and the depth that this book goes into about what naval life was like for members of the British Navy during this time period and what seafaring was like at that time is absolutely fascinating. I really am glad that I read this book, and I found it very interesting. I learned so much about what like the seafaring was like during the early 1800s, and like what the ships were really capable of and what the life of a sailor was like. It was really, really cool. And you can really tell that this author did so much research. And I really feel like this could be like almost like a factual account of things that happened. And I believe they were actually inspired by real events. Another thing I really liked about the book, and why Captain Jack really kind of gloms onto Stephen Mawtrin as someone that he wants to become good friends with is because as he's elevated to the position of captain, he realizes that he can no longer have the relationship with his crewmates that he has had in his naval life up to now. Where he had peers and could joke around with people and could just like share his thoughts in kind of an unfiltered way. And he does see Stephen Mawtrin as a peer because he is not really an underling of his the same way that all of the other men on his ship are. And so I really liked how the book really emphasized how lonely Jack felt after being elevated to captain and how Stephen was kind of his reprieve from that. On the flip side of the book having very little plot arc to speak of, I felt like the movie had an excellent plot arc. There's a single ship, there's like a single villain that they are chasing after. The whole point of the movie is them like going after this singular vessel, and like the trial and error of them doing that was very gripping and very cool. In the movie, they are in the New World versus in the book, they are in European waters. I definitely liked the differences that brought up. The whole sequence where they go to the Galapagos in the movie is one of my favorites, and I really like how they were able to emphasize how Stephen Mawtrin is such a naturalist and how much he cares about science. And I really feel like that the way that they did Stephen Mawtrin in the movie is very iconic to the way that he was in the book, and I feel like Paul Bettany was a perfect placement, a perfect casting for that role. The other thing about the book that I was not a huge fan of is that I just felt like it ended very abruptly. Like I said, there was no real like falling action to prepare me for it. There was like a trial that Captain Jack goes to and has to like report on major battle that they were just in, and the trial successful and the book ends, and it was just like, oh, okay. But it was like, I don't know, it seemed very minor to like in terms of everything else that had happened in the book. It just felt like, oh, okay, we're done now. Versus the movie ends at a very satisfying moment that is very much tied into the character and plot arcs that made the movie such a success. I also just want to praise the movie for how beautiful it was. They built the ship for the film, I think, and filmed almost exclusively on the ship, and it just feels very real. The setting is very cool, historically accurate in all the ways that I think the author would have approved of. And watching this movie, especially when I was younger, is like the first time that I ever really felt like, oh my God, like how scary a naval battle really could be, and like the true force of cannon fire and how destructive that is. And again, that was one of the things that I liked about the book is I had no idea like how much repair that these ships had to go through after a naval battle, and like how much they could do while still out at sea and didn't necessarily have to go back to port every time. They were so talented and resourceful, and the people who lived this life certainly were cut of a different cloth than people today. I guess that's how I'll say it. The few things that I noticed that were exact replicas both in the book and the movie I really appreciated. When I was going through reading the book, I was like, oh, I remember this moment from the movie. And so the fact that the movie was not the first book, but kind of a conglomeration of multiple books, I still really appreciated that they pulled moments out of the first book that felt meaningful. One of them being the story that Captain Aubrey tells when they're sitting around the table in his captain's cabin at dinner one night about how when he served under Lord Nelson, the first thing that that Lord Nelson ever said to him was, "Pass me the salt." And it's a great joke in the film, and it came straight from the first book. They also do this trick when they're trying to escape a ship that is pursuing them at night, where they build like a fake structure and light the lanterns on it to be able to sail away in the night, and the other ship to be firing on the false ship instead of chasing them. And that was done both in the movie and in the book, and I really just thought that was incredibly clever and great, and just shows how ingenious they really were. They also, in both the book and film, when these amazing naval battles against crazy odds where they're like outgunned and outnumbered and win anyway. And those, to my knowledge, are based on real historical battles. And I just think that is incredible and amazing. And yeah, just really gives me an appreciation for what what was possible back then. Also, there's a great moment where Stephen Motrin is doing brain surgery on one of the crewmates after he is injured in a battle, and everyone is like convinced that he's going to die for sure, and the brain surgery is successful, and the crewmate like fully recovers. And it's like dark magic to the crew members. They're just like so in awe of Dr. Motrin and his capabilities as a surgeon. They really respect him and his craft. Of course, he still is like doing lots of things that are not like modern medical standards, like giving people leeches to like thin their blood and you know, silly things like that. So yeah, that's that's my big long ramble. I said this was gonna be short, but I feel like I talked longer than I expected. That's my impressions of having now read and watched Master and Commander, and why I personally think that the book is not as good as the movie. My husband probably would disagree with me, but he also loves the film. So if you just want to get an impression of the story, I would highly recommend watching the movie instead. But if you are someone who really likes nitty-gritty historical detail, or you're a big history buff and already know a lot about this, or you really want to learn more about 1800s naval jargon, then I would say the book is definitely for you. Rush out and get it right away. Thanks so much for hanging out and tuning in for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.